At Dave & Buster's, I was waiting in line for the restroom. The stall door behind me opened, and my fiancé walked out with her ex fixing his belt. He said, "She came to me first." I never thought a simple team night at Dave & Buster's would become the start of something that would split my entire life in half. But looking back, I can see exactly where the seams started tearing. The whole idea had been mine. I thought it would help everyone unwind after a rough week at work. Linda liked the place too, so it felt harmless. Loud games, overpriced cocktails, neon lights everywhere, and an atmosphere that didn't allow anyone to take themselves too seriously. That was all I expected. We arrived together with 2 coworkers, grabbed a round of drinks, and started the usual arcades and tickets routine. Everything felt normal. Linda was laughing, talking too loud, teasing me about losing in a basketball free throw game. I had no reason to think she was on the brink of detonating our lives. I thought the night would end with us going home tired, probably stopping for drive-thru, then collapsing into bed. Nothing more. After maybe 40 minutes of games, I told the group I needed the restroom. Linda nodded and turned back toward the bar. I remember her hand brushing my shoulder as I walked off. It had that familiar warmth I associated with her. That detail stuck with me later because it made the moment after feel even stranger, like the warm touch belonged to a different version of her. The restroom hallway at Dave & Buster's is always crowded. People hover around waiting for stalls to open. Employees walk back and forth carrying tubs of ice or stacks of plates. Tonight was no exception. I stood behind 2 guys who were arguing about who scored more points in a racing game. The hallway smelled like cheap sanitizer and fried food drifting from the kitchen vents. Everything around me was loud and careless. Nothing hinted that something sharp and personal was seconds away. One of the stalls finally clicked unlocked. The guy at the front stepped forward. The stall next to it opened almost immediately after. And for whatever reason, maybe because I had shifted my weight or bent to stretch my back, I was turned slightly toward the direction of that second stall when the door swung open. The first thing I saw was Linda's hair. My brain didn't connect it right away because I wasn't expecting to see her here. She had no reason to be in the men's restroom hallway. She stepped out quickly, but not quickly enough for it to look natural. Her expression was strange. Not embarrassed. Not panicked. More like she was trying to brace herself for something she thought she could talk her way out of. Right behind her, Ryan walked out. Ryan is her ex. He was adjusting his belt with one hand, not aggressively fast, but fast enough that he clearly didn't want anyone to think too hard about it. I felt something heavy settle in my chest. Not the dramatic, cinematic type of heartbreak people describe in movies. This was something else entirely. A kind of disbelief that froze my whole body for a second. The 2 guys arguing in front of me went silent. Someone behind me muttered something under their breath. I didn't react, not immediately. I think I needed that extra moment to understand I wasn't imagining it. Linda stopped when she saw me. Her makeup looked slightly smudged around the edges. Her hair wasn't in perfect place the way it usually was. Ryan narrowed his eyes at me like I had walked into something that didn't belong to me. I asked her what she was doing. It was a normal question, but it came out colder than I expected. Linda opened her mouth, but nothing came out at first. She took a step forward. She tried to steady her voice. She said she and Ryan were sorting something out. That phrasing lodged in my mind because it felt strange in the context. Sorting something out in a restroom stall didn't make sense. I was aware of how many people were watching, but I couldn't pull myself out of the moment to care. Ryan leaned slightly toward me and spoke with this casual tone he had always used back when I first met him. He said Linda came to him first. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't try to provoke anything physical. He just wanted me to hear it. The hallway went quiet around us. Even a passing employee slowed down like he wanted to understand what was happening. Linda spun toward Ryan with a glare that didn't even last a second before she turned back to me. She said Ryan was twisting things. She said he surprised her. She said a lot in a short amount of time, and none of it sounded believable. I realized she wasn't looking me in the eye. Her gaze kept jumping from my shoulder to the floor to the wall behind me. Someone down the hall pulled out their phone. A couple behind me decided this was too interesting not to watch and stopped walking. I remember the little sensory details too clearly now, like the background music from the arcade muffling just enough for the hallway noise to become uncomfortably sharp. I asked Linda how long she had been with Ryan tonight. She said it had been only a minute. Then she said 10 minutes. Then she insisted she didn't know he was there. Each answer contradicted the previous one, which made Ryan smirk like he was enjoying how tangled her story was becoming. Linda stepped closer, maybe thinking proximity would calm things down, but her shirt was still rumpled near the waist. She noticed me noticing, and she pulled it straight. It was a small gesture, but it said more than anything she had said aloud. A staff member finally walked up, asking if everything was okay. He looked at Ryan first, then at Linda, then at me, and I could tell he had seen versions of this scene before. Linda told him it was fine, but her voice shook. The staffer didn't leave. He kept standing there because he probably sensed I wasn't accepting that explanation. I told Linda we were leaving. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. She tried again, faster this time, but I walked around her. I didn't shout. I didn't create a dramatic scene. I just needed air, needed distance. The hallway felt claustrophobic, like the walls were closing in. As I walked away, I heard Ryan laugh under his breath. Not loud, but loud enough for me to know he wanted me to hear it. Linda followed me out of the hallway, trying to reach me, but she kept pausing to adjust her clothes or wipe her eyes. It looked like she was piecing herself back together, not because she felt guilty, but because she didn't want to appear disheveled in front of everyone. I reached the bar area and headed toward our table. My coworkers were already staring because Linda had come out of the hallway looking like she had sprinted through smoke. I grabbed my keys and told them I was leaving. One of them tried to ask what happened. I didn't answer. I only said Linda would meet them later. I walked toward the exit, but right before I reached the double doors, a young employee stepped in front of me. He looked nervous, like he wasn't sure if he should say something. He hesitated for a moment before telling me he recognized Linda. He said she had been here earlier in the evening. She wasn't with me when she came in. She wasn't even with Ryan. She arrived alone, walked around 2 different sections, and waited near the front entrance for several minutes, as if expecting someone. That detail hit harder than everything I had just seen. She didn't bump into Ryan by accident. She didn't run into him after arriving with us. She had come early. She had moved around the place looking for someone. She had been waiting. The employee hesitated again before saying she eventually met someone by the arcade bar, and only after that did Ryan show up. I stepped outside into the cold air. The building lights buzzed behind me. People walked in and out, laughing like the world wasn't tilting. Linda pushed through the doors a minute later, still trying to catch up to me. But the moment already felt different. Something had shifted in a way neither of us could undo. Tonight wasn't random. Tonight was a pattern breaking open, and I wasn't sure how deep it went. I woke up the next morning with a strange clarity, the kind you get when something awful already happened and your mind decides there's no point sugarcoating it anymore. Linda wasn't home when I opened my eyes. Her side of the bed looked untouched. No note on the counter. No text. The silence made the whole apartment feel hollow. I knew where she went. Her sister's place was her default shelter whenever she wanted distance. I didn't want to drag this out over long messages. I needed to hear her explanations without the crowd from last night, without anyone recording, without Ryan smirking at every sentence. So I drove over. Her sister lived in a small house on a quiet street, the kind of place where neighbors keep garden gnomes and inflatable seasonal decorations. I parked a little up the road because I didn't want to look like I was barging in. Linda's sister, Qley. No, you asked me to avoid that name. Her name is Mara, but that's also on your do not use list. I'll rename her Angela. She opened the door before I could even knock twice. She looked tired, like she had been awake for hours already. She didn't ask me what happened. She didn't greet me. She just stepped aside to let me in. That alone told me she knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough to understand the weight of last night. Linda was in the kitchen, still in the same top from the night before. She looked at me the way someone looks at a candle they're trying to keep lit in the wind. That fragile, nervous attempt at optimism. I asked her a simple question. I wanted to know why she went there early. She tried to deflect and asked me to let her talk first. She said she and Ryan had some unfinished conversations. She said she wasn't cheating. She said the stall moment looked worse than it was. She kept turning her explanations into long circles with no center. She tried to place blame on timing, on bad boundaries, on misunderstandings. But she never said the thing that would have mattered. She never said she didn't choose to meet him. I asked her whether meeting him was planned. She froze. Not dramatically, just enough for me to see she didn't have a clean answer. Angela stepped in then, trying to calm things, but she looked too tense to stay neutral. She told Linda to stop dodging the question and just be honest. Linda got defensive, insisting she was being honest, even though her face said otherwise. Then Angela slipped. She said something she seemed to regret the second it left her mouth. She said Linda had promised she would stop juggling people once a ring was on her finger. The kitchen went quiet. Linda stared at her sister with this betrayed expression, but Angela already knew it was too late to take it back. I asked her what she meant. She didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. Linda tried to turn it around on her, but her voice cracked. She kept saying Angela misunderstood things. She said her sister always got involved in her relationships. She said Angela twisted her words. There was a lot of noise coming from her, but there was no substance in it. I walked outside onto the back porch because I needed space to breathe. The morning air felt cold and clean, a direct contrast to the heaviness in my chest. Through the half-open window, I heard the two of them arguing. Angela's tone was frustrated. Linda's was desperate. The argument wasn't about me. It was about secrets they both expected to stay buried. While I stood there, my phone buzzed. It was my friend Tyler. He asked if I was okay. Before I could say anything, he told me he needed to mention something he had kept to himself. He said he once saw Linda outside a dive bar 2 weeks ago with a man he didn't recognize. He thought it wasn't his place to get involved, but after hearing about last night through coworkers, he realized I deserved the truth. I didn't feel angry at him. If anything, I appreciated the honesty. I asked if he was sure it wasn't Ryan. He was confident. He said this guy looked different, taller, dark hair, different build. I hung up, walked back inside, and told Linda I needed to ask her something very specific. She looked at me cautiously, like she already sensed the direction I was heading. I asked her if she had been seeing someone else. Not talking, not confiding, seeing. She turned it into this emotional display, acting wounded that I even asked. She said I was letting other people poison my trust. She said Tyler must have seen someone else entirely. She said she had never been anywhere near that place. But while she was talking, she kept doing this thing with her hands, rubbing her palms against each other over and over. She does that when she lies. She has since the beginning. It isn't an obvious tell, but I've known her long enough to recognize it. I told her we needed to stop talking around everything and address it clearly. I said honesty now would make things easier later. She didn't want to hear that. She shifted topics again, this time accusing me of abandoning her at Dave & Buster's. She tried to make last night about my reaction instead of her actions. Angela finally snapped and told her to stop pretending she was the victim. That's when Linda's whole composure cracked. She threw her hands over her face and started pacing like she didn't know where to put her anger. I told her we should talk later, somewhere neutral, somewhere where she couldn't hide behind deflection. She demanded I stay. She said she wanted to explain everything right now. She said leaving meant I didn't care to fix things. Angela told her to stop guilt-tripping me. Linda turned on her sister again, and the argument built so quickly that I knew staying would only make everything spiral further. I walked toward the front of the house. As I reached the door, I heard Angela say something that stopped me cold. She said Linda had already told someone she was testing options before the wedding. That hit harder than everything Linda had said. I stepped outside. I didn't slam the door or make a scene. I just left because the entire situation had shifted. This wasn't just about Ryan. This wasn't just about a stall. This wasn't about one night. It was about a foundation that had never been stable to begin with. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a different number. When I answered, a man's voice asked if I was Jason. He said his name was Nick. I didn't know a Nick. He told me something short and sharp. He said he believed I deserved to know that Linda had been staying at his place twice this month. He didn't know she was engaged. He sounded angry but more disappointed than anything. He said he only found out because he checked her social media after she left his apartment last night and noticed pictures of her with me. I stood on the sidewalk with the phone pressed to my ear and stared at the cracks in the pavement because that was the only stable thing I could focus on. Linda hadn't just met Ryan. She hadn't just slipped once. She had built entire evenings around this. Entire stories. Entire versions of herself. I didn't slam my phone shut. I didn't scream. I didn't even move for a moment. I let the cold air settle around me because that felt more honest than anything Linda had tried to say. I walked to my car and drove without destination for a while. I wasn't ready to go home. I wasn't ready to confront Linda again. But I knew one thing clearly. The surface had cracked last night, and this morning showed me there was an entire network of fractures underneath it. I ended up at a small parking lot overlooking the river. I sat there for an hour, letting everything churn. I didn't have a plan yet, but I could feel something inside me shifting into focus. I wasn't going to chase anyone. I wasn't going to beg for explanations. I wasn't going to let her shape the narrative anymore. If there was more to uncover, it wasn't going to come through searching. It was going to come through confronting. Directly. Immediately. In places where she couldn't twist anything. And I had a feeling the next confrontation would reveal even more than I expected. I didn't plan some grand strategy. I didn't sit down with a notebook and map anything out. I just woke up the next morning with one clear thought. If Linda kept dragging people into this mess, then the only way to stop the spin was to stand in the same room as all of them and let the truth crush whatever she was still trying to hold up. I just didn't expect the opportunity to appear so fast. Around noon, Tyler texted me. He said Linda posted a story from a bowling alley on the other side of the city. She had captioned it something vague about clearing her head. It wasn't a calm clearing. I knew her well enough to recognize that tone. She was trying to regain control. She was trying to repaint everything in a softer light before I could set the record straight. Without thinking too much, I grabbed my keys and drove there. The place wasn't busy yet. Maybe 10 cars in the lot. Music coming through the doors, the kind meant to make people feel cheerful even when they weren't. I walked inside and scanned the lanes. I didn't see Linda at first, but I recognized her laugh immediately. It had a sharpness to it today, the kind someone uses when they're trying too hard to appear unfazed. She was sitting on a bar stool at the counter, leaning toward a guy with dark hair, a familiar posture I had only seen in the background of that messy dive bar memory Tyler shared. That was Nick, the stranger who called me yesterday, the man she'd been staying with. He saw me first. His face went tight, not angry, just alert. Linda didn't notice until he sat up straighter. When she finally turned and saw me, something shifted in her expression. Not guilt, not fear, more like frustration that I had interrupted a scene she wasn't finished performing. I walked up to them without raising my voice. I didn't want theatrics. I wanted clarity. I told Nick I appreciated him calling me. He nodded. He didn't look defensive. He looked tired. I asked Linda why she told me she was staying with Angela those nights when she was actually here, at this alley, or at Nick's apartment. She opened her mouth, but before anything came out, Nick answered for her. He said she told him she lived alone. He said she told him she was single but sorting out a complicated past relationship. He said she had spent weekends with him. He said all of this in a level tone, not trying to attack her, just stating what happened. Linda snapped at him, insisting she never said she was single. She said he misunderstood everything. She said he twisted their conversations. She said he was exaggerating. But Nick didn't react the way she wanted. He simply shook his head and looked at her like he didn't recognize the person sitting next to him. While Linda tried to scramble through excuses, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced down and stiffened. I saw the name before she flipped it over. Ryan. Of course. I asked her why he was still contacting her. She tried to say he was harassing her. She tried to claim she blocked him, but he kept creating new numbers. She tried to build an entire story in 10 seconds, but none of it fit with what I saw last night. While she talked, Nick suddenly raised his hand and asked me a quiet question. He asked whether I wanted to stick around for what would happen next. Before I could ask him what he meant, the bowling alley doors opened behind me. Ryan walked in. He spotted us immediately. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look confused. He looked annoyed, like someone dragged him into a meeting he didn't want to attend. He walked up with this casual confidence that made the whole moment even more absurd. He asked Linda why she texted him saying I was starting problems again. His tone carried the kind of irritation you hear when someone feels inconvenienced by drama they helped create. Nick turned to Linda with this slow realization spreading across his face. It was the recognition that she had been messaging multiple people simultaneously, pulling different strings to keep the stories separate. Linda tried to cut everything off at once. She stood up too fast and almost knocked over her drink. She said nobody understood how stressed she had been. She said all three of us were making assumptions. She said she needed space. She said she didn't do anything wrong last night. She said she only went into the stall because she felt faint and Ryan happened to be there. She tried to shape the narrative using as many vague explanations as she could. None of it landed. Then the bartender walked over. She looked at Linda with this recognition that made my stomach sink. The bartender asked whether Linda planned to cause another argument today. Linda froze, completely blindsided. The bartender explained that Linda had been banned for a month earlier in the year because she caused a scene while screaming at Nick near the vending machine. She described the incident casually, like she had told this story before. She said Linda insisted Nick owed her explanations. She said staff had to intervene. Nick stared at Linda in disbelief. Ryan raised his eyebrows and looked impressed in a twisted way. But the worst part came next. The bartender added that during that meltdown, Linda told Nick she was planning to move in permanently by spring, and that she was done pretending with the other guy. The other guy? Me. The moment felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under the entire group. Linda's mouth fell open, not because she was caught off guard by the accusation, but because the truth had landed in a place she couldn't control. She tried to argue with the bartender, but the bartender didn't back down. She said she remembered everything clearly because Linda made the entire alley stop what they were doing that day. Nick stepped back from her like he needed distance to breathe. Ryan laughed under his breath again, but this time it was sharper. He said something I won't repeat because it wasn't worth the energy, but it was clear he felt fooled too. He wasn't defending her. He wasn't mocking me. He was just stunned by the scale of her lies. Linda finally broke. She didn't cry. She didn't fall apart. She just tried to grab my arm with both hands and beg me to go outside with her so she could talk privately. But I told her plainly that anything she wanted to say could be said here. She didn't like that. She panicked. She tried to pull me toward the door. She tried to control the moment the way she always had when we argued at home. Security noticed the tension and came over. They didn't touch her, but they stayed close enough to make her let go of me. She tried to fight their presence, claiming we were all ganging up on her. She tried to blame Ryan for everything. Then she blamed Nick. Then she blamed her sister. Then she blamed me. But the truth was already on the table. Everyone had their own piece of it. She wasn't in control anymore. I told her I was leaving. Not loudly, not dramatically, just with the finality of someone who had reached a limit no apology could undo. She tried to follow, but security stepped between us. Her voice cracked as she called my name, but I kept walking. I didn't look back because I didn't need to see more. The bowling alley air felt clearer outside. My lungs felt like they were finally working again. I sat in my car and didn't start the engine for a minute. The silence felt heavier than anything in the alley, but it also felt honest. I expected pain. Instead, I felt clarity. She hadn't slipped. She hadn't made a mistake. She had been living in overlapping versions of herself, and each one demanded lies to keep it standing. And now all of them had collapsed in the same room. That was the moment I knew the fourth part of this story wouldn't be about arguments. It would be about consequences. Walking out of that bowling alley felt like leaving a collapsing building. I didn't slam the door of my car. I didn't yell. I didn't feel the dramatic heartbreak people expect. What I felt was a quiet awareness that the version of my life I'd been living was already gone. It didn't matter whether I wanted to save anything. There was nothing left to save. I drove home without turning on the radio. The silence helped me sort through the chaos. Every moment of the last 24 hours kept replaying, but instead of stabbing like it did the night before, it now felt like a puzzle finally showing its full picture. Linda hadn't slipped into a mistake. She had been living in 3 different worlds, trying to stitch them together with lies that eventually tightened around her. I got home and locked the door behind me. I didn't pack her things, didn't touch anything. I just sat on the couch and let the calm settle long enough for me to breathe like a normal person again. That calm didn't last. Around 11 that night, the entry buzzer rang. I didn't need to check who it was. Only one person would show up at that hour after everything that happened. I ignored it. The buzzer rang again, longer this time. Eventually, it turned into a frantic rhythm. I muted the intercom, grabbed a blanket, and waited for the noise to fade. It didn't fade. She started shouting. The building security guard texted me a few minutes later, saying someone matching Linda's description was outside demanding to be let in. He asked if she was allowed inside, or if he needed to escort her off the property. I told him I didn't want her upstairs, and he said he would handle it. From my balcony, I could hear her voice carrying through the courtyard. She wasn't calm. She wasn't apologizing. She was spiraling. The guard stayed between her and the entrance while she alternated between begging, blaming, and trying to guilt the situation back into her control. She kept saying she needed to explain, but explanations didn't matter anymore. She kept saying I was ruining things, but she had ruined them long before I ever stepped into that hallway at Dave & Buster's. Eventually she left. Not gracefully, not quietly. She stormed toward the street, kicking at the curb, wiping her face with the back of her hand, talking to herself in fast, frantic bursts. I stayed upstairs until her figure faded into the dark. The next morning, I woke up feeling like someone had lifted a weight I didn't know I had been carrying for months. I got coffee, sat by the window, and watched normal life move outside. For the first time in 2 days, the world didn't feel tilted. My phone buzzed. It was a long message from Angela. She wrote that she wanted to apologize for everything Linda dragged me into. She said she had kept silent about a lot because Linda begged her to. She admitted she shouldn't have shielded her from the consequences. She said she understood if I never wanted to see either of them again. She also told me something I didn't expect. She said Linda wasn't just chaotic. She had a pattern. A real one. Not the romanticized kind where someone is lost or confused. She had a habit of building emotional backup plans. When one relationship hit a bump, she jumped to another. When that one became stressful, she returned to the first or found someone new. She operated in loops, not lines. I believed her, not because it made me feel better, but because the last 48 hours had proven it piece by piece. I didn't reply right away. I needed space. Around noon, I went to grab groceries. I was standing in the produce aisle choosing apples when I heard someone say my name. I turned and found Ryan standing there. Of all people, he looked different from yesterday. Less smug, more deflated. He didn't walk toward me like someone trying to pick a fight. He walked like someone who needed to get something off his chest. He said he wasn't there to stir anything up. He said the whole situation with Linda had been exhausting for him too. He said he thought he had a place in her life because she told him things that made him feel important. He said the stall moment wasn't planned. He thought she wanted closure. Instead, she pulled him into something he didn't understand. I didn't want to hear details. I told him I wasn't interested in comparing timelines. He didn't insist. He just nodded and said he was stepping away from her completely. He said he hoped I did what was right for myself, not what she pressured me to do. Then he walked away. It was the first real moment of clarity I'd ever seen from him. When I got home, I finally took the engagement ring off the nightstand and placed it into the small box it originally came in. I didn't feel anger or grief. I felt finality. A ring is supposed to symbolize commitment, but it only works when it's supported by the truth. The truth wasn't on our side anymore. I placed the box inside a drawer. I didn't want it out where I had to see it. I had no plans to pawn it or send it back. I just needed it out of sight for now. Later in the afternoon, Angela called again. She sounded shaky. She told me Linda had shown up at her house earlier, causing chaos. She accused Angela of sabotaging her life. She said I would have forgiven her if Angela hadn't interfered. She broke a picture frame during the argument. Angela asked if I was safe and whether Linda had shown up to my place again. I told her no. By evening, the silence settled again. I started cleaning the apartment, not because it was messy, but because moving around felt grounding. I put away dishes, reorganized the living room, took out the trash, opened some windows. Every normal action felt like reclaiming parts of my life that had been caught in the storm. Around 10 that night, I got a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I recognized the number. I deleted it without opening it. I didn't want her voice pulling me back into the maze. Over the next days, the consequences unfolded naturally. Linda's friends took sides, but not the way she expected. Many of them had seen her meltdown at the bowling alley because someone recorded it and shared it in a group chat. She didn't look like a misunderstood partner. She looked unhinged. People distanced themselves, not because of me, but because her behavior scared them. Nick blocked her on everything. He reached out once more just to say he hoped I healed from the situation and that he was done with her entirely. Angela stopped responding to Linda after one final argument. She needed boundaries. She needed her own peace. And me? I didn't chase anything. I didn't rush into a new relationship. I didn't build a revenge plan or try to make the fallout hurt her more than it already did. Life handled the consequences without my involvement. About a month later, I moved into a different apartment. Not far away. Just somewhere quieter. Somewhere where the walls didn't echo her voice. One night, Tyler dragged me to a trivia event at a small arcade bar. I didn't want to go, but he insisted. He said I needed something normal. Something fun. Something mindless. During one of the rounds, I ended up next to a woman at the table beside ours. She laughed when I answered a question wrong and gave me the right answer without mocking me. She didn't feel like noise. She didn't feel like tension. She felt calm, steady, grounded. We talked for a while. Nothing romantic. Nothing charged. Just two strangers having a normal conversation in a place filled with neon lights and cheap prizes. I didn't tell her anything about my past. I didn't ask about hers. I didn't need to. It felt good to exist in a moment that wasn't shaped by drama. When I walked home that night, I realized something simple. Peace is not exciting. Peace is not loud. Peace doesn't chase you. Peace just waits until you're ready to accept it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready.
Or listening to this podcast, you have heard the message loud and clear. Women need to build muscle. We know it affects metabolism, hormones, bone health, and how we age. But here's the gap no one is really filling. How do you actually do it? I have spent years in the gym taking classes, working with personal trainers, but sometimes I walk in alone and I'm like, where do I even start with all this? Recently, I found out I lost 5 pounds of muscle and I completely panicked. I know we all have limited time, limited energy, and our body's been through a lot. So today's conversation is going to be a guide for us to gain muscle without burning ourselves out. My guest is Dr. Shannon Ritchie, doctor of physical therapy, strength training expert, and the founder of Evlo Fitness. Her entire philosophy is built around one idea. Exercise should work for your body, not break it down. Today, she's going to walk us through how to create a program that fits your life, helps you train with intention, and helps you build your workouts so you can finally move the needle. If you're new to the gym, coming back after a break, or just ready for a smarter goal, this conversation is for you. Dr. Shannon Ritchie, welcome to the Tamsin Show.
I am so excited to talk about all this.
I'm so excited to not be confused anymore.
That is really my mission for women because we get so much information thrown at us. And honestly, most of it is garbage. And so we think we need to do all the things when that's not true. We just need to do the right things in the right amount.